This episode of Warp 5 is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek FM at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the non-profit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join in on the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode or any other, please join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type Babel, that's B-A-B-E-L, into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
Hi, this is Tucker Smallwood from Star Trek Enterprise. You're listening to Trek FM.
How we doing, Trip? Ready when you are. Prepare for warp.
Course laid in, sir. Request permission to get underway. Let's go.
Welcome, Boomers, to another episode of Warp 5, Trek FM's dedicated Enterprise show. I'm your host, Floyd Dorsey, and I'm joined, as always, by the Chief Engineer and Co-Pilot, Brandon Shea Matala. How's it going, Brandon?
I'm doing very, very good. Have you tried these potatoes? They're delicious.
Yeah, I just don't... I'd rather just eat the food that's on my plate, though, and you not eat the food that's on my plate. Right. And joining Brandon and I is one of Warp 5's associate producers, Justin Oser. Welcome back, Justin.
Hi, really happy to be here again on Warp 5.
So last time you were on and we talked about Beyond with Jeff Harlan was also on here with us. And we kind of had to just get into that because we weren't really sure how big of a show that was going to be. But usually what I like to do is I like to ask new guests about their Star Trek and Enterprise experience, but we didn't really have time last time. So I kind of want to make up for that this time and find out, where did you get your start in Star Trek? Like, when did you remember watching Star Trek? And then when do you think that you become a fan?
Yeah, so for me, the first Star Trek I remember watching was Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country in the theaters when I was a kid. I liked it, but it didn't really spark any fandom or wanting to really go too much further. I did catch a season of Voyager in first run when I was in high school. I do remember seeing a DS9 episode when I was in college. Somebody showed it to me. So there were a couple of times when I'd seen Star Trek in different incarnations, but when it really kind of kicked in for me and I became a fan was after I saw Star Trek 2009. And that made me want to go back and see what I had missed. So I watched TNG all the way through a couple of times. I went on to DS9 and then Voyager and Enterprise. So the first time I saw Enterprise was actually in 2015, and I liked it a lot. It's definitely one of my favorites.
Cool. All right. So you caught it on the Netflix or just like after the fact?
Absolutely. So I think when Enterprise was out from 2001 to 2005, I had absolutely no awareness that it was out there. None at all.
I hear that because it was actually hard to find it even if you had the channel. And a lot of people are like, oh, it was a ratings failure and all this. But if it would have been syndicated or if it had been shown wide enough like TNG was or like DS9 was, more eyes would have seen it. And like you probably would have heard of it,
Yeah, I didn't even hear of it. And for me, I was just coming out of college in 2001. And I think I was focused on making sure, I got a job and I got a place to live and I could, start my life. So it wasn't something that was in my consciousness at all. And really, Star Trek only kind of came back into my consciousness when I met my wife in 2004. And she had already been a big fan for a lot of her life. And I was like, yeah, I'm not so sure about it. But when we went to see 2009, for some reason that sparked something in me. And I wanted to really go back and see what I had missed. And I started with TNG because that was my wife's favorite. And I just kind of went from there. And I loved TNG from the beginning and just kind of kept going.
Well, Why do we have Justin on here? Let's get his wife on the show. What's going on here? She's the real fan.
I know. She's been a fan for longer than I have. She was a fan. She saw TOS in the reruns in the 70s. She saw the motion picture in the theaters, and I think she saw all the different incarnations as they came out. But by this point, I've kind of made Star Trek such a huge part of my life. It's actually a bigger part of my life than it is her life at this point. Although she does still very much love Star Trek.
You love Star Trek, but you like your wife.
I love both.
That's a Deep Space Nine reference for the boomers out there.
Yeah.
See, I don't remember Enterprise being that hard to find the episodes when it originally aired. I don't remember that. Everybody says how hard it was to find, but I remember watching it every week, and I don't remember missing any episodes. I don't know.
But you had been a fan of Star Trek before that, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
See, that's the difference. For me, I wasn't a Star Trek fan at the time, so I wasn't even thinking about it or where to find it. No. I don't think I was even watching much on TV at that point anyway.
What I mean is Floyd's saying with ratings and how you couldn't even find it on TV because the schedule was changing. What I meant is, like, it was always, as far as I remember, I had no issues finding it on the satellite or whatever I was watching at the time, and I just was watching it.
Like, I was watching it in a big market, so I was in Dallas, and the channel that we had also had, like, Mavericks and Rangers baseball. So if there was ever a game, they always preempted. Always. Mm-hmm. And then they would end up showing the first run of the episode. They might show it at like midnight, the next day or something like that. So it was kind of, I don't know. It was difficult. It was difficult for me. And I was a basketball coach at the time. So I had basketball practices and we had games, and it seemed like they would change the schedule to where we had whatever night that week we had games. And I tried to set the VCR back in those days, the VCR to record, and then I'd come home to try to watch it, and there'd be like, wrestling had run over by 20 minutes, and I didn't get the whole episode, or baseball's doing something, or they went long, or they started early, or something like that. I don't know. It was difficult.
I guess it could just depend on where you are, because I think of when Mike Schindler has talked about a lot of times how he found it impossible to catch DS9 in Chicago because they'd always preempt it with Cubs games. So I think it just depended back then where you were.
One of the many reasons why you should be moving to Canada. Consistent Star Trek.
Unless there's hockey on, right? Unless there's hockey on, and then forget it, right? Right. So for this episode of Warp 5, we'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, and there are many ways for you to do that. The best way to join the larger discussion is in the Babel Conference. Just type Babel, B-A-B-E-L, into the search field on Facebook, and you can join in all the fun. And also, any of you out there that are on Twitter, you can find us at Trek FM and on Facebook at facebook.com/Trek FM. And if you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can go to speakpipe.com/Trek FM and record a message and leave it to us. Another really cool way that you can contact us about today's show or any other shows is to leave us an email. You can go to our website at trek.fm/contact, choose send to a show, and select Warp 5, and that'll come right to us. And I have a Warp 5 email to read before we get started today. So this is from Rebecca Skipper, and she says that she's stationed at Space Dock. So Rebecca's taking care of the ships, I suppose. She says, I watched Enterprise much later. I don't agree with Archer's actions in Season 3, but every captain has their faults. I think this was in response to the episode where we had Richard Marquez on talking about why Archer's awesome.
Okay. Yep.
So she said that Picard is her favorite captain, but nearly put his pride before crew in First Contact. She said that Janeway broke nearly every Starfleet regulation in Equinox. Maybe. Janeway tried, the whole reason that we had Voyager was because she didn't want to break the Prime Directive. And then I think people could probably pick out a lot of other times that she did also. She broke it.
One or two.
Right.
One or two were.
And then she mentioned, Rebecca mentions Kirk and says that Kirk abandoned Khan and killed an entire Klingon crew, and that he visited alternate timelines just to study history without considering how his presence affects the timeline. Kirk, did he go back in time? I don't know. Yeah, maybe.
Assignment Earth when he goes back to just...
Yeah, I'm just kidding. Yeah, they actually say that we're here to observe history or like historical, what do they call it? Like events, I guess maybe that's what they said. She mentioned Cisco. Brandon, she's got Cisco here. He says
Cisco's
that
the man.
He lies to get the Romulans involved in the Dominion War.
Isn't that awesome?
He does what he has to do. I mean, I think Brandon and I are on the same page that, well, I wouldn't say he's the absolute best, but he's tied for me with Picard. I love Cisco.
I like Cisco also. And then Rebecca goes on to say, yet I like all of these captains, though Picard is my favorite. In fact, Archer matures more in 4 seasons than most captains. I love to see Archer grow as a leader and his crew followed as well. Picard, for the most part, is the type of commander I would follow, and Archer's the type of commander that I cheer for. Because of the nature of his mission and what is at play, humans have to prove themselves to the Vulcan High Command. Seeing Archer and humans take the lead and form the Federation is ironic, given how many doubted their capabilities initially. Thanks for a fun and engaging show. Please do more crossover episodes. They are so much fun for me as a listener. Thank you so much, Rebecca. You gave us a lot of feedback there. We were actually asking on that at the end of that show for people, their listeners' feedback and who was their favorite captain, and how did the captains actually rank, and how did Archer stack up to their captains. So thank you so much, Rebecca.
Yeah, and Rebecca, we just want to apologize that it took so long to get back to you with the email, because just to let everybody know out there, I think we've mentioned a couple times, but how we record is we're releasing every other week, but we actually record both episodes in one night just to save us some time, and then I edit them as we go. So if you send the email in that time period shortly after the episode drops or something like that, we may unfortunately forget about your email, and it may be a little bit of a delay. In fact, we've got another email here that I want to read that came into us from. We actually have a new associate producer on the show as well. His name is Mark Flessa, and he sent an email to Trek FM back in June. And again, Mark, sorry that it took so long to get back to you, but it says, to Chris and the Trek FM crew, for the past 4 or 5 years, I've been listening to podcasts on a regular basis, namely podcasts about 2 of my passions, Tolkien and paleontology. A year or 2 later, I finally decided to branch out and search for some Trek-related podcasts. The first one I decided to listen to was Warp 5, mainly because I've been a staunch defender/supporter of Enterprise from the very beginning, and was happy to see that there were other fans out there. Ever since then, I've been hooked on Trek FM, listening to Warp 5, The Ready Room, Earl Grey, The Orb, To the Journey, Standard Orbit, Hyper Channel, From There to Here, Commentary Trek Stars, Saturday Morning Trek, and Stage 9. I've been a huge Trek fan since I was a little kid. I have a photo of me dressed as Geordi for the first Halloween costume I ever got to pick out myself. But before I listened to Trek FM, my fandom, while never for a second snuffed out, was in a rut. Ever since I listened to that first Trek FM podcast, Trek has become a bigger and better part of my life. So last month I finally took the plunge and donated to Trek FM's Patreon page. Even though I'm a lifelong Trekker, I'm not the most tech-savvy guy, and I've never donated to anything like Patreon before. So far, I've not been able to join in on the Patreon Roundtable discussions because of his work schedule, but I hope to do so in the near future. So that's awesome, Mark. We really appreciate your email, and you know what? I've said it here, too. My fandom was basically dead when I found Trek FM as well. Like, I hadn't watched an episode of Star Trek in a decade before I found Trek FM. You know, after Enterprise went off the air, I bought the DVDs, I watched them all, and that was the last time I watched any Trek. You know, so... You know, Trek FM's been a great thing for a lot of people, so I'm glad you found the network for sure. And thanks for supporting us here on Warp 5. We really appreciate it.
Yes, Mark, thank you so much for being our new associate producer. Welcome aboard. Welcome to Warp 5. So for this episode, Boomers, Brandon, Justin, and I are going to share our top 3 favorite Phlox moments. So this was a challenging assignment. I just kind of threw this idea out there to Brandon and was like, hey, let's do, we need to do a quick episode in July. And I was like, hey, let's do Phlox moments. Oh my goodness gracious. The time spent trying to narrow this down to 3 was ridiculous. Justin, did you have any trouble, or did you just have them right away?
Well, there were some that I thought of. I mean, for me, this is the first time I've done an episode like this where it's, you know, choosing a top 3 instead of talking about a theme or an episode or something like that. So I thought, I really need to have more than 3 for honorable mentions, and in case you guys pick some of the same ones that I have. So for me, it took a while. I mean, I had some ideas. It took a while. I needed to find those moments, and make sure that I know them in the context of the episode, and then keep building it up. So I've actually got 7 moments, but you may not hear all of them. But I've got a top 3 and some honorable mentions and others in case you guys pick some, because I think that for Phlox, there's lots and lots of great moments, and he's actually my favorite character on Enterprise. So I love doing the research for this and watching some clips and things.
Yeah, I love him too. I think he's my favorite character on Enterprise as well. But it was tough narrowing down too. But I got 3 top 3, and 3 for my top 3, and then 3 honorable mentions myself as well. But yeah, Phlox is great, and there's a lot of fun parts with him.
Well, I wrote down 3 things that came to mind like right away. Like when I thought of Phlox, what are the first three things I think of? And those are the ones I wrote down. But I put this question out on Facebook this afternoon, and a lot of listeners gave us their favorite Phlox moments. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a good one. Oh yeah, that's a good one. I should have wrote that down. But I went ahead and went with the first 3 that I had. This doesn't mean probably that it is my favorite, because Phlox is probably, after thinking about it, is probably my favorite character. Like he has got so much going on in this series. John Billingsley just did an amazing job with this character, and the writers actually, they knocked it out of the park. Like the perfect actor, and it was written right for this character and this actor. I think he did really well. So Justin, go ahead and kick us off with your moment number 1. What do you have on for us?
Okay, so the first moment I have comes from an early episode, Fight or Flight, which is the first episode after Broken Bow. And Phlox and Trip are in the mess hall. They're talking about, sounds like I took one of Brandon's already. That's why it's good to go first sometimes. So they're in the mess hall, and they're having this conversation. And I just love what Phlox says. I'll just quote a few lines here. So Phlox says, "Every moment's been an adventure for me. Humans are so unpredictable. Have you seen the quantities of food crewman Nemad consumes? Not really. Have you smelled Ensign Socorro after she exercises? She gives off a fragrance not unlike the adrenal gland of a Nausicaan. And crewmate Bennett and Hanem over there, do you see them? If I'm not mistaken, they are preparing to mate. Do you think they might let me watch?" And Tucker says, "It's good to see you're enjoying yourself." I love that. Always makes me laugh.
Yeah, I love that one too. That was my potato reference at the beginning of the episode here.
It happens before that.
Reaches the potato over to Trip, and Trip actually eats the potato. So I don't know. But I think what I like about Phlox and why I love that scene so much is, we're going to talk about it. I'm sure somebody's got it on the list. I purposely didn't put it on my list, but he's an optimistic character. He looks for the good in every situation. He's fascinated by everything. He's enjoying what he's doing, and nothing bothers him. And this is one of those situations. He's like, she smells like this. Have you seen him eat? They're going to mate. I don't know. It's awesome. I love Phlox so much because he's so positive. And that's what I like about Enterprise. Like Travis Mayweather, he's also such a very positive character, And I don't know, it's one of the things that I really enjoy about Enterprise. So yeah, you stole one right off my list, but that's okay.
But what I love about it too is that he's so curious about these things, and he has absolutely none of the hesitation or worries about what he says that humans do, either now or apparently in the time of Enterprise, because Tucker would be very uncomfortable saying something like that. But he's saying all of these things because he's on this human ship, and he just loves all of the things going on and has no idea what people will think about it. He's just totally, completely open and honest. I don't think he ever holds anything back for what he's going to say, and I just love that.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. All right, Brandon. So, well, actually, we may have some crossover, and especially with the listeners' favorite moments, we've got some double mentions. So
yeah, we'll read the listener ones at the end, but one of mine's, that's fine that one of mine's taken. So I'll read my honorable mentions at the end. But why don't you go ahead, Floyd, with your first choice there?
Okay. Well, my first one of the very first things that I thought of was actually a non-speaking moment, and I think it's from Doctor's Orders, where he's having to take care of the ship, and the crew are all asleep, and he's feeding one of his menagerie. He drops something in the menagerie, and then he pulls another one out, and he's about to drop it in. He looks at it, and he just eats it. That was so awesome. I don't know why. I don't know why. As soon as I thought of Dr. Phlox, that's the first thing I thought of. I don't know why. It's not even a speaking thing. It was just the way he just like, that looks good. I think I'll try that.
Yep.
But that actually kind of goes with what you all were saying, that the way he was in the mess hall.
I guess at that point in the episode, he's supposedly by himself on the ship, right?
Right.
But I thought that was one of my honorable mentions, actually, for I think later on when he comes into sickbay and he's completely naked feeding his animals.
That's one of my honorable mentions too.
That's on my list. That's my next choice, is when he's walking around the ship naked.
Yes.
That's my next choice. So
Yeah. But that's also the one where he's just sitting by himself in the mess hall watching a movie, eating a bowl of popcorn with this huge smile on his face, and he's jogging around the ship singing in Denobulan while Porthos runs behind him. He's just, at least before things get crazy, he's just having such a good time even being by himself. That's how optimistic he is.
So Brandon, that was one on your list there. So did you think it was odd that he was okay with streaking around the ship even though he kind of has a thing with being nude in public?
I don't know. I think it's awesome. I think it's a great part of his character. So, I mean, if there's anybody here from Vancouver, like, I don't know, like, this is maybe TMI for people, but there's a nude beach in Vancouver that I frequented a lot in my youth. Oh. So, I don't know. I could
Ooh, secret coming out.
I could picture myself doing that. I'm like, everybody's asleep? Whatever. So you can walk around naked. Right? Who needs clothes? It's all temperature controlled, right?
Well, you know, thinking about that, his world is crowded, right? Is it crowded or not crowded? I can't remember.
I think it's very crowded. It's a huge population.
I think it's crowded. Okay. Yeah, and I think they talk about in some of the books too that it's extremely crowded.
So then him having that, like running, but being in the ship totally alone, instead of being a bad thing, he saw it as a vacation, you know? And then the chance to be able to walk around naked. I still couldn't do that though, you know?
It's like, ooh, I haven't done this. I couldn't either because I would be like, I don't know, this feels weird. What if somebody wakes up all of a sudden for some reason and comes in here?
You're just dreaming. You're just dreaming.
I wouldn't be able to do it, but
right.
I know. It didn't really
happen. I had
this
weird dream, Phlox, that when I woke up, you were naked. No, it was just a dream.
Very good. All right, Justin. Yep. So what is your moment number 2?
Let's see. So, yeah, my second moment, I don't know if I'll steal this from someone else. It's from 2 Days and 2 Nights, which is the one on Ryza, but the scenes in the episode where Mayweather has this, I think, allergic reaction or something, and they have to wake up Phlox, and they wake him up from hibernation, and he just starts like gibbering in Denobulan, and he starts talking, you know, like, why'd you wake me up, and what's going on, and later on he's in sick bay and he's calling Mayweather captain, he's calling T'Pol captain, he doesn't know how to use the instruments, but actually I think my favorite part of that whole thing is when he tells Cutler that they need Regulan bloodworms, and she says, "Oh, is it this one or this one?" And he says, "No, we need fresh ones." And he goes over to the console to contact the bridge, and he says, "We need to go to Regulus maximum warp."
Very good.
He's just so hilarious in that whole set of scenes where he's just kind of in a stupor and hibernation. But in the end, he does his job, and that's what's cool about Phlox too. He's gonna do his job as a doctor, even if he's totally messed up and doesn't even know what's going on.
Very good. Very good. And that was actually some listeners on Facebook had that down as the hibernation cycle. Like James Goodeve said, when he was forcibly awoken from his hibernation cycle. And then there was in one of the groups, they actually posted a YouTube clip so everybody could see like the whole scene of him having to be woken up. And it's hilarious.
I actually watched that. I rewatched that scene today just so I could remember all the stuff that happens. And there's this point at which, you know, Cutler puts, I guess, a hypo spray to Phlox's neck to wake him up, and she's like, "Is this working?" And then all of a sudden, Phlox is like, "Ah, what's going on?" And it really seems like the actress who's playing Cutler is genuinely like surprised and freaked out. Like she didn't know when he was going to do that, so she's like, "Ah, what's going on?" So I don't know. I love that.
At the end of the
scene,
doesn't he like inject himself too? Like he's like she injects him a couple times, and then at the end, doesn't he inject himself too? At one point in that scene, I think
so.
I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking of something else, but anyways.
But yeah, it's great. And the fact that denobulans have this hibernation cycle, I think, is a really intriguing aspect to their species that I don't think see elsewhere, where they have to hibernate like a couple days a year or something like that. So I think that part's cool too.
Very good. So Brandon, are we at moment number 2 for you? Or have we already...
No, my number 2 was Phlox naked on the ship.
Okay, so we skipped on that. All right, so my moment number 2 is... Actually, it was the confronting the Vulcan psychiatric analyst, Farrat, that was posing as a doctor that was questioning Archer in Season 2's The Expanse. And that is another thing that when I thought of Phlox, he was optimistic and always jovial and like a really the nice uncle kind of guy, the guy that you always want to go talk to and things like that. But if you crossed him, he had a temper. He was very businesslike and very professional. And he heard the questioning that was going on. And I actually, when I watch that now, I watch for Phlox. Like, I'm not really paying attention so much to the conversation that's going on, but I'm looking over the shoulder. And when they show Phlox directly, I'm looking for Phlox to see when he's like, when it starts getting annoying to him, and the face that he makes as he turns to go look at the monitor. And then he turns around and confronts it was a psychiatric analyst, because the Vulcans were trying to figure out if Archer was crazy for suggesting that something was from the future. That there was like a piece of the probe from the future. So that actually, a lot of people are, they all mention like the positive things, and Phlox is great. But for some reason, I guess because that was kind of not in his character, and that really stood out to me. So what did you guys think about that?
Well, that's interesting, because I didn't think about that moment at all. Honestly, it's been a little while since I've rewatched Enterprise, so I didn't remember that moment. It's a different... Actually, the next moment I have when we get to it is kind of a different side of his character, because I think a lot of times people think that he's this jovial, optimistic guy, and he's, he makes you laugh, but he has his other sides too.
Right. Did you remember that, Brandon?
Yeah. A little bit, yeah. I was thinking it was something else, and then I'm like, oh, no, I think it's this other scene here. But which episode was it again?
It was The Expanse. It was right after Archer had proven or shown that a piece of the probe was from the future. And the Vulcans sent someone over to check on him.
He looked up to see, and he's like, oh, no, that you don't actually work in that position, do you? Right?
Right. Yeah, he was saying that that his name, and then he worked. I don't even remember why he was looking Archer over. Like, he was looking him over for some reason. I can't even remember why he was even doing that. I need to go back and watch that episode again. But it ended up, while he was doing the physical examination, he was actually questioning him. And the questions were very blunt. So that was a standout moment for me. So Justin, what was your moment number 3?
Well, for my third moment, I have something from the Season 2 episode, The Breach, which is the episode where they encounter a ship that has an Antaran, and they've been adversaries with the denobulans for a really long time. And the guy needs to be treated, but he's refusing to be treated by Phlox because he's a denobulan, and Phlox is trying to convince him to get treated. But there's a couple moments I like in there, because it kind of shows Phlox's really reflective side. So I just have something here for a conversation that he's having with T'Pol. So Phlox is saying, when I was quite young, I wanted to take a trip to an arboreal planet near our system. It was a park of sorts with a great variety of exotic animal life. Some friends and I had planned the journey for months, but a week before I was supposed to leave, one of my grandmothers took me aside and told me I couldn't go. Why not? She said the planet was tainted. Antarans had lived there once. Even though they'd been gone for years, she believed the place had been spoiled by their presence. Did you go? No. But when I had children of my own, I took them there. I was determined not to raise them as I was raised. I just love that story that he tells, and that he acknowledges, like, I couldn't get over that at the time, but I'm going to make sure this doesn't continue into the next generation, and that my children can get past that. and get beyond their prejudice and live the lives they want. I just like that. I think it's kind of a beautiful story that he tells there, and his determination to do better is one of the things that I love about Phlox as well.
Yeah, that's a great episode. There's so much in that episode that's really powerful, and when he's talking to, I don't remember the character's name, but when he tells that story, a similar story to the guy that's dying as well, about his son, it's a really powerful side to Phlox, and that's another great thing about him. And my next mention here is a very powerful moment for Phlox as well. But I think that because he's this alien character, he can give us this really good perspective on a lot of issues, comedic as well as serious.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the things I like, is that non-human perspective. Actually, when I was thinking recently about all of my favorite Star Trek characters, they're all non-human. I love Spock and Data and Kira and the Doctor and Phlox, because they have this other perspective, and we can see things, through different eyes and really reflect on ourselves.
Yeah, me too.
Very good. So, Brandon, what is your moment number 3?
So my last one here, it's from Similitude, so I knew it wasn't going to be on Justin's list.
Oh, because I made that comment that it hasn't connected with me. Yeah,
but all the interaction that he has with Sim, but specifically the moment itself that is the best one, is when Sim comes in to do the surgery, and Sim says, "You're a damn good father," and Phlox says, "You were a damn good son." That just rips my heart out every time Phlox says that. "You were a damn good son." Like, oh, painful. I love it.
And that was my moment number 3 also. That was...
took one from you.
I could say just about any scene from Similitude, like when he's taking care of the baby, and when he's sitting on the floor with him. But that scene, well, that whole scene is just awesome, I think. Like when he walks in and he's talking to him, and he's telling him he's ready, and then he walks over and he pulls the curtain back, and tells Trip, basically, you owe me one, But yeah, when he says that to Phlox, and Phlox is swallowing, like a tear, down, that is very moving. So yeah, that is a great moment. Yeah. Very good. So an honorable mention that I have is basically I said, well, actually, honestly, my honorable mentions have already been taken, because I said any scene with Phlox and T'Pol in the mess hall. So we pretty much we've covered that. Like in Broken Bow, he reaches over and he pulls her celery off her plate, and the look on her face, as he's just trying it out without, "Oh, may I?" He's already got it like in his mouth by the time he asks if he can have it, And then also I had the walking around naked. That was in my honorable mention. So Justin, what did you have for honorable mention?
Well, one of my honorable mentions, I think it's one of my favorite scenes with Phlox for sure. So in the episode Home in season 4, after they come back from fighting the Xindi, there's resentment toward aliens on Earth, and it's Mayweather and Reed and Phlox in a bar, and two guys start making trouble and saying I think they're saying that they think Phlox should leave, and so they start fighting. And I love that Phlox's response is to inflate his face, and it stops the fight cold, and they leave. I just think that's awesome that in this non-violent way, he's like, "Stop it! I'm inflating my face," and they just kind of disappear. I think that's awesome.
Oh, it's this bizarre defense mechanism that his species is had. Like, it just makes you think, okay, so what type of animals were chasing them down and hunting them that they needed this as a defense mechanism, right? Like at some point in their history. So yeah, that was one of my honorable mentions too. Yeah.
It makes me think of like a pufferfish, the way it can blow up. So
that's exactly what what Dan Gunther, co-host of Literary Trek, said to the Facebook post. He called it pufferfish Phlox in Home, obviously. Is one of his favorite moments.
Yeah. That's how I wrote it down too, was pufferfish face.
Very good, very good. And then Brandon, what did you have on honorable mentions?
So I had the pufferfish face, but two I haven't seen them yet, but obviously from Broken Bow is Big Smile Optimism Captain.
Yes.
It's definitely one of my honorable mentions. I'm sure a few people on Facebook said that.
Yep. And yeah, that's like his signature to me. That's his signature. You know, anytime someone wants to say, you know, well, what's this Phlox about? Here, watch this clip. You know,
that's him. And then nobody said the Chasing the Bat sequence in Night in Sick Bay.
That was one of my other ones. I just didn't have a chance to mention that. I
ludicrous.
It is kind of crazy, and he has like this pole with this paper hawk on it, and he's gonna flap it and make this sound. He's like, "Roo, roo." It's just hilarious to watch. Of course, it doesn't work, but I love that one too.
The listeners' favorite moments actually mentioned A Night in Sick Bay quite a bit, so I'll just run down really quickly. There were. Thank you so much for listing those, and so quickly. You all filled up the comment section of those posts so fast. And unfortunately, I mean, that would be a whole other show, you know, talking about how awesome Phlox is. Maybe that might be a whole other show. But just running through some highlights here of like main themes that many people were talking about. Like Ano Flynn said, I love his little interactions with his animals in the sick bay. Everything has a use and everything is lovingly cared for. And several people mentioned like his animals. Dan Gunther had mentioned that he really liked the take charge attitude and resourcefulness and divergence. And a few people actually mentioned that also. And Heather Barker mentions when Archer and Phlox are discussing Phlox's polyamorous and polygamous lifestyle in A Night in Sick Bay. And A Night in Sick Bay was mentioned many, many times as being, like many people mention it as their favorite episode. And I think when we actually talked about Life in Sick Bay, somebody didn't like it, or A Night in Sick Bay, they didn't really like it. But that was mentioned as like a favorite episode. I think a lot of people say
they don't like it, but I love it.
Right. I kind of like it just for the laughs, I guess. I don't know. But she said, although Enterprise did an overall disservice to polyamory by using it as a gimmick or a joke, this moment where Phlox's lifestyle is accepted without questions or judgment by a Starfleet captain stands out. And I agree, Heather, that actually they did a really good job with that particular scene. Not so much with the other, because it was kind of a joke to talk about Phlox's wives and all those things. You know, they kind of brought it in as a joke. But that I thought they did a good job with that, because Bakula just played it, you know, just straight up. Like, okay, these are just two guys talking. This is just a normal thing that we're talking about here. And then Heather Barker, she gets a +1 for stretching my pronunciation and vocabulary on this one. So thank you so much, Heather. Mike Morrison, co-host of Metatrex and co-associate producer of Warp 5, he mentioned that he loved the bond that Phlox had with Sim, because he was just like a dad, which we mentioned earlier. Chrissy Zilagi, I'm sorry, Chrissy, if I messed up your last name. You can't miss when his wife was hitting on Trip and Phlox said he should sleep with her. And several people mentioned that also. Toddy Wasapi said that the whole A Night in Sick Bay was fantastic, that she loved the grossest things. It was disgusting and hilarious. Nick Estacio said too many moments, which actually a lot of people just posted, said too many moments to mention. I don't even want to pick a favorite because there's so many. He said Phlox, such a perfect blend of many Trek character staples. The discussion between him and Archer at the end of Dear Doctor was one of his moments. The episode where he deals with his own cultural preconceptions and xenophobia is classic Trek, and that was in The Breach, which we mentioned earlier. And his early series of movie date moments are also awesome. So thank you so much for those of you that wrote in. I know there were so many more of you that wrote in, and thank you so much. And also, any of you listeners that are hearing, please post on the Facebook posts to this, or you can hit us with a Twitter, or you can actually send us an email of what were your favorite Phlox moments. And we'd love to see what you think about it and share it, please. And those of you that have already posted on this post, I'm sure there are others that you might want to post on our Facebook announcements. So, Justin, final thoughts on favorite moments of Phlox. So this was a hard assignment, don't you agree?
Yeah, I think it was difficult, but I'm glad we came up with some choices. Although, sorry, I took some away from you. And
they're all my favorites.
But no, there are a lot of. Yeah, I mean, they're all great moments. But I think, you know, again, people think of Phlox as, you know, this optimism and and someone who's really funny, but he does have other sides, moving sides or contemplative sides. I think it's a really well-rounded character. You get to learn a lot about him. There's a lot of memorable moments. I don't think anybody, even if they don't like Enterprise, I don't think they can say if they've seen Phlox that he's not a memorable character. He's great. John Billingsley does an amazing job, and it's been fun talking about my favorite Enterprise character.
Good. And Brandon, what did you think when you were having to narrow it down to 3? What did you think about this assignment?
Oh, there were so many. There was a lot. Like, I wanted to put down that one with, that one from Broken Bow with T'Pol and the celery, and, that's a great scene too. And I don't know. It's just, he's such a great character. He's definitely my favorite character on Enterprise, and I'm glad we got him, and he's a lot of fun, and I like watching Phlox episodes whenever I get the chance.
Very good. Yeah, this was fun. This was fun. Just thinking back of Phlox and doing a little research and watching some scenes, and he's just entertaining. He's just so entertaining. Billingsley did a great job. I think the writers did a good job with his character. And yeah, I mean, I was looking at my 3 choices after Justin mentioned that there are so many sides to Phlox, and I actually picked a funny side, a serious mean side, and a kind of a emotional side. So that was by accident that those actually stood out like that. But he's everything in between. I mean, the guy, he can go from emotional and mad to is extremely happy and optimistic. So he's just a great character. I really like Phlox. But Phlox is not the only thing we've been talking about on Trek FM this week. So here's what you may have missed elsewhere on the network.
Previously on Trek.fm, The Ready Room.
So we gave the pilot all we had, and then we ran into some problems with episode 2, and we told everyone, just throw something on the page, take a vacation, come back, and in episode 5, we'll just figure it out.
These guys from All Access are calling me every 15 minutes. How's it going?
Standard Orbit.
Apollo has been at this for thousands and thousands of years. He knows the human mind, knows the human heart. There's an old expression, right? That old age and treachery beats youth and inexperience 6 days a week and twice on Sunday. I'm going to take the old age of Apollo in this and find a way to outwit Gary Mitchell and put Apollo on top.
Meta Treks.
But Pulaski immediately chimes in and says, speaking of Pulaski, she immediately chimes in and says, I have a problem with that kind of rigidity. It seems callous and cowardly. She calls Worf a coward.
Yeah, and if she were any other man, he'd kill her where she stands.
Stage 9, a podcast about the people who make Star Trek.
I don't know what the format of this show is, but I assume we pick something and talk about how it's bad.
Or talk about how it's good.
That seems a lot easier.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
Check out these shows and find out what we're talking about in your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe. If you're an Apple user, be sure to hit the subscribe button in Apple Podcasts on iPhone, iPad, Apple TV, or the desktop iTunes app to get the latest episodes as soon as they are published. And while you're there, please leave us a star rating and written review. And if you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered. You can find our shows on Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, and most third-party apps. And you can also stream and download the MP3 file or grab the RSS link from our website. If you'd like to help us keep all our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/TrekFM. That's patreon.com/TrekFM to get all the details. There are all kinds of perks. You can start with you can give us $1 a month. And that would help us so much if we had even half the people that were listening to our podcast just did $1 a month. For the great Trek content that you get, that would help our network out greatly. If you jump up to $5 a month, you get access to the Patron Zone. And if you step it up a little bit, you can get to $15 a month. You actually get to do the Patrons Roundtable, where you actually get to be on your podcast. You get to be a guest on a podcast. And if you go all the way up to $25 a month, you can actually be an associate producer of a show. So, Brandon, you are on the Patron Zone. So, what can our listeners look forward to seeing if they go to if they haven't been there in a little bit?
Oh, there's lots of early releases that are up there and some exclusive content. We got some exclusive commentaries that are there and some little deleted scenes that we sometimes take out of an episode here and there. So lots of fun stuff for you there. Some wallpaper, things like that.
And we'll appreciate all your support, any support that you could give us. Again, you'll find all the details at patreon.com/TrekFM. Also, if you'd like to wear your Trek.fm fandom, you can find great Trek FM themed merchandise at trekfm.store. So at this time, I always like to thank our co-associate producers that support our show and the network through Patreon, Mike Morrison, Tim Cooper, and Justin Oser. Justin, thank you so much for being a associate producer. And like we mentioned earlier, we have a new associate producer, Mark Flessa. Thank you so much, Mark, for being an associate producer of Warp 5. Thank you so much. Also like to thank Tony Robinson for creating the very cool show art for our releases and for our shows. And Brandon, of course, for editing and publishing Warp 5. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
So, Justin, if our listeners would like to maybe comment about some of the choices that you made for your favorite moments or share with you their favorite moments, how could they get in touch with you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at TrekFan4747, where I tweet about nothing but Star Trek, and I'm currently tweeting my TNG rewatch. I'm on Season 2 right now. And you can also find me hanging around the Babel Conference on Facebook.
And Brandon, if our listeners would like to ask you about some of the choices that you made, or like maybe tell them what they would like, what their favorite moments are, how could they get in touch with you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter as well at Brandon Matella. I poke my head up every once in a while in the Babel Conference. And you can find me over on the Fandom Podcast Network, where I do a show called Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast with my friends Chris and Tom. And I've got a couple episodes left of Melodic Treks, which will be wrapping up very soon. That's here on Trek FM, and it's all about the music of Star Trek. And Floyd, where can people find you when you're not walking around the ship naked?
Great. If you'd like to talk to me, you can find me in the Babel Conference. I usually I'm not in there naked, but sometimes maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I'm in the Babel Conference, the Trek FM listeners page on Facebook. So Boomers, thank you so much for listening, and join us again next time for another episode of Warp 5. Heather Barker mentions when Archer and Phlox are discussing Phlox's polyamorous and polygamous, is it gamous or gamous? Polygamous lifestyle in A Night in Sick Bay. Although Enterprise, what was that?
Polygamous?
Oh, sorry.
Yes, that's...
Hey, let's edit that out. All right, let me start over.
Nope.
Yes, we're editing that.
Forget who has control.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even look at the second word. I was only looking at the first word. Okay, all right, here we go.